Hello and welcome to the week that really was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan on Gript Media for the week ending the 24th of October 2025. It's been a very serious week in Ireland. It's been dominated by two stories: the presidential election, which we'll get to at the end, and the enormously distressing incident in City West on Monday, which was followed up, as we know, by a series of violent nights, seeing clashes between Gardaí and protesters. We'll get into all of that. It's a multifaceted story. But before that, I'll say hello to Sarah and ask you how your week was.
My week's fine, John. I mean, not a great week to be an Irish person who cares about politics. Not a lot of good news stories, but sure, look.
No, there's not. There's not. You were also came under a bit of fire after the podcast last week for your immense privilege in being able to ignore the deposit return scheme. A lot of people in the comments thought,
Who knew that bins would be what done me in, you know?
yeah.
First of all, people were upset with me because they were like, well, some people have to go and get it. My point is, I still stand over what I said, that it's a scam. Because if someone robs money or takes money from me and I have to go around to their gaff and mop the floors to get it back, they still took my money. I don't think they should be adding money on to the cost of a plastic bottle. And also, I'm time poor. I have kids and activities that they do, sports that they do on the weekends, and not a lot of time. And loads of people, by the way, there's people in Ireland who are carers for people who have 15 minutes to go out and get to themselves to go out and do a shop, who don't have time to stand in a queue and wait for €4.22 back for 45 minutes. So,
as I said to our good friend Niall Boylan today, Thursday, when I was on his radio show, I don't know why they don't let recycling companies come around and collect the bottles and give you money off your bill for them or something. That would be one way of getting the recycling companies back involved.
Yeah.
But look, yeah, we won't talk. We talked about that last week. Sarah pissed everyone off. Everyone liked me. That's the main thing. But also, before we get into the thing, I wanted to say that I obviously, since I spoke to all you good people last, I had the privilege of spending 3 days last weekend in London at the Battle of Ideas, which is a festival organised by my very good friend, Claire Baroness Fox, who is a wonderful advocate for free speech and all of that stuff in the UK. The festival was attended by 4,000 people, loads of you. And I do mean this genuinely, like well over, a dozen and a half, at least 18 people came up to me over the course of the weekend to say that they're fans of both Gript and indeed this podcast. And several people, Sarah, asked why you weren't there. So I want to say hello to all of those. But I want to say a particular hello to Emer S. You know who you are, who is a big fan of the show and was very enchanting company over the weekend, and who was there to volunteer at the festival and did everything that she could for everybody who wanted her help. So thank you to everyone who I spoke to there. And I want to say, for people who are interested in the Battle of Ideas, the Irish version of it, which is much smaller but is being hosted by us at Gript, is taking place on the 22nd of November next in the RDS in Dublin. Tickets are available for sale on the Gript website. If you go to gript.ie/events, you will find it there. They're only €25. It'll be a great day. Sarah will be there. I'll be there. Laura Perrins will be there. Niamh will be there. Ben might even show up, and then we'll have a lot of guest speakers as well. And it will be great to meet as many of you as possible at that event. There will be a lot to discuss, and we hope to see you there. All right, Sarah, give me your reaction to what happened in City West this week.
Okay, so there's multiple layers to this, isn't there? There's the event itself. There's TUSLA. There's immigration and the consequences of same. There is media reaction and the garbage that becomes. Where shall we begin, John?
I think we have to start at the beginning, which is the event itself. I mean, the thing that actually annoyed me most about this event this week, I mean, obviously the fact that a young child has been seriously sexually assaulted by all accounts. It remains an allegation, hasn't been proven in court. Very important to say that at the outset, but certainly an allegation that the state is taking serious enough to charge somebody with it. So we have to work on the basic assumption that something really terrible happened to a child. And that is the worst thing. But to me, the second worst thing was the statement issued by TUSLA, the Child and Family Agency.
I know.
Which essentially said, not our fault, Gov. Well, the child was out in town and she absconded from our care, and then we don't know what happened to her, and then she turned up assaulted. Oh, oops, terrible. Like,
I know.
George Hook was sacked for less. A lot less.
But I also, that's a good starting point, because I have a 9-year-old. And I'm not saying it would be right, but you might say if somebody was 16, you might say, well, okay, a 16-year-old could be wild, could be running off, much more difficult to manage, able to get around, able to do more than a child. This child is 10. 10. I mean, her behavior shouldn't even come into the statement. It's completely irrelevant. She's a child, not a person who happens to be underage, who's 16 or whatever. 10. I mean, what if she was 8? Would they still be saying that? It's just a bizarre statement for them to release. I'm old enough, as they say, to remember when victim blaming was considered to be a bit much. Obviously, that's back in vogue. Unbelievable statement for TUSLA to release in the aftermath of something like this. But more as part of the bigger picture, I mean, I don't know what it will take for the government to take serious action or conduct a serious consequential investigation into TUSLA in general. But if it's not this, I don't know what it could possibly be. We had a dig for a child that had been murdered or died, we don't know, in the North County in the last few months. We've had children that have gone missing. We have had children that have gone missing that have been ultimately found in brothels, as I understand. There's been all kinds of hellish stuff associated with TUSLA in the last number of years. And as far
Don't
as I'm
forget, you're forgetting. I think, is it the Kyron Durnan case up in Dundalk
sorry,
as well?
also
The other case, yeah.
Kyron Durnan, countless missing children is what I'm saying. They're the ones we know about. But just failure, we'll agree, failure after failure after failure after failure with absolutely no consequence. A CEO who earns €211,000 of taxpayers' money per year. A chairman in Pat Rabbitte, former Labour Party, who's chairman of the board of TUSLA, and they all sit around talking about God knows what at their board meetings, but they're certainly not talking about how to make it better. And if they are talking about how to make it better, they should all be fired immediately because they're actually going backwards and getting worse. Where is the value of this organisation? What does it do? And it's an epic failure, a disgrace, and people should be rioting in the streets about TUSLA for starters. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, everyone gets the benefit of the doubt, right? And it is, in fairness, it's easy for you and me to sit here and go, how did they lose the 10-year-old? And if this was a once-off, I would simply be criticizing the statement. I'd be saying the statement is a disgrace because you're putting the blame on the child. And I'm shocked, by the way, at how little criticism they've gotten for that. Have you know? I mean, unless I don't listen to that much other Irish media, but I think I would have noticed if there was a significant backlash against TUSLA for the tone of the words they used in the aftermath of that event. But anyway, I digress. The point is, anyone can mess up once or twice. But as you rightly point out, it is failure after failure after failure. It is systematic. TUSLA is at the center now of every scandal involving a child. And every single one of them seems to involve like sheer carelessness. A child. I mean, the child, the little child whose name I'm sorry, I've forgotten. And I should have looked it up. I didn't realize you were going to raise him. But who they found in North Dublin. And the Department of Social Welfare discovered that child is missing. TUSLA didn't even discover that the child was missing for a number of years. The Kyron Durnan case, another one where they've just completely lost track of somebody who was supposed to be in their care under their remit. This organisation is a disgrace. It's funded to the tune of over £1 billion a year. And the best bit is that it's there. It's there because we didn't ever want to have the stuff with the Catholic Church again. That's why it's there, because we wanted to put child protection fully into the hands of the state. It gets a wedge of cash. It is chaired by former Labour Party Minister Pat Rabbitte, whose signal record of political failure in everything he touches continues. Everything Pat Rabbitte touches turns to shit across his career. It's happened again. And yeah, I think it's, I'd actually trust the local county councils to do it more. Because at least the kids in their care will be local, right? If you had, Monaghan County Council in charge of the welfare of kids from that county and Cavan County Council, so I think the welfare of kids will be local. Local social workers might know the family. This national monolith is just a catastrophe. No one seems to care about the kids.
But with no accountability. I mean, we have a lot of this comes down to the same principles over and over again, which is what value do we get for that €1 billion spend? These aren't, we live in a country where the government, the discourse, the media will spend more time talking about hurty words that hurt somebody's feelings and less time talking about an organization whose failures, apart from death, which is obvious, have massive lifelong consequences for the lives of those children. So children who are ignored, forgotten, left behind, the impact of that damaged childhood as a result of being forgotten or missed by TUSLA is lifelong. But we'll
Yeah, but
hear more about somebody being misgendered and how damaging that is, or changing words for other, garbage. We live in a country where we do not get value for our money ever on any big budget spend, whether it's the HSE or TUSLA or whatever it is. I often think, and we take it and we accept it and it goes on. I often think about, do you remember the movie Blood Diamond with Leonardo
Mhm.
DiCaprio? And they have this phrase, TIA, they keep saying to each other, this is Africa. Whenever anything is going wrong, they're like, TIA, this is Africa. TII, this is Ireland. Incompetent, overspending, fucking bullshit that has massive consequences, usually for the disadvantaged children, poor people, whatever. And the media and the government don't give a shit.
Well, there's another reason why the government don't give a shit. And that is because TUSLA is the best thing that ever happened to them. TUSLA will never be abolished for the same reason that the HSE will never be abolished. And that is because you and I are currently talking about TUSLA and not the Minister for Children. And we talk about the HSE and not the Minister for Health. TUSLA is this gigantic behemoth. As I say, it's headed by a former politician in Pat Rabbit, who I think gets, 20 grand a year to chair the board. Then there's a chief executive who gets 211 grand a year. And there's no politician, there's no elected politician at the top who you can vote out. And the government just kind of goes, that's a matter for TUSLA.
I
Whereas in
know,
actual fact,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, right? But that's fine if it was a mud guard. But the point of a mud guard is that it actually gets mud. What we have is is an organisation that's there to protect the minister, so nobody asks anything about the Minister for Children. But the CEO of an organisation that's losing this amount of children, or that this kind of thing is happening, should be in the firing line, and they're not either. So fine if it was there as a mud guard so that the Minister for Children didn't lose their job, but no one loses their job ever. No, there'll be no consequence for this.
The Minister for Children is one Norma Foley, right? That's who has that job. How much have we heard from Norma Foley this week on this story? Absolutely none. What is Norma Foley going to do about it? Say your phrase, Sarah.
She'll do nothing.
She'll do nothing. And that is just on the child protection side of it. And I mean, one of the reasons this happens is because the media, I think, I did watch some of the late night shows. We'll come to those later on. Very little pressure on this. The main issue here seemed to be, with regards to this story, making sure that the public didn't go too far right on it, condemning the riots and all that. But we'll come to that, because the other element of the story, obviously there's the child who's the victim. Then we have the alleged perpetrator, the person who the state alleges committed this offence. What do we know about him? He is a young man in his 20s, who my Garda sources tell me may have been in the UK for a while before he came to Ireland. And he was the subject of a deportation order. The state ruled, after his presence in the state for a number of years, that he had no right to be here, and in 2024 said, you have to go home to your country of origin, which is in North Africa.
That's obviously going well. And that plan is obviously going well.
That plan is going well. So what we have here is a situation. We have two people, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of ultimate guilt or innocence. We have two people in a situation, alleged by the state to be in a situation, neither of whom should have been there. The 10-year-old child should not have been there. That was the responsibility of TUSLA. And the person who's accused of committing this terrible crime against a 10-year-old child should not have been there. That is the responsibility of the Department of Justice. So both sides of the equation here have failed utterly in their most basic duty. And the result has been, one of the worst and most high-profile crimes of the year. And that is before we get into the point that, the residents in CityWest, not the residents in CityWest, but the residents in Saggart and the area around the hotel, have been warning about something like this for about 2 years now. And no one has listened to them. So
imagine now, after having meetings and being told by Sinn Féin councillors that you are far right and being told that you're racist or whatever. And now for this to happen for people like Micheál Martin, now to say, well, you know, there's legitimate concerns. Like, would that not just make you want to put your fist through your computer screen? You know, so why does it have to happen? Do you know what I mean? Like, it must be just so unbelievably aggravating to have been a local person who attended those meetings and now this.
Yeah. Look, I don't blame anyone for throwing a rock. I genuinely don't. They shouldn't do it. Absolutely shouldn't do it. But I find it hard to blame people for it because, like,
Of course they shouldn't do it. And part of the reason why they shouldn't do it, John, is because I understand the mentality, but they shouldn't do it because it gives then the media something to absolutely fixate on rather than the thing. And I said to you on the phone earlier on, I was in the car today. I turned on the radio. I know you disapprove, but it was on RT, and I caught the news. It must have been the morning. What time was I in there? 10, something like that. It was the RT news bulletin, and it had a piece about the traumatized Ukrainian children who were so afraid of the riots or whatever. Now, I'm not saying that didn't happen, but I'm saying it's such a deliberate attempt by RTE to focus on anything but. So when you riot and there's all this, then they all just focus on that. And this wasn't actually even local people. It was infiltrated by people from other countries. And it's this and it's that. And it allows them to make it the story, to move the story on to something different when it should be kept on this horrific crime, the two people involved, why they were both in the, as you say, why they even met, how they both got into that situation, and what the consequences will be. Instead, all the news is about the rioting. In saying that, I don't blame somebody who feels like they're just like, you cannot disenfranchise. I've said this on the podcast for 2 years since they were marching in North Wall. What's that now? 1.5 years, 2 years ago. You cannot
East
come out.
Wall. That's 3 years
East
ago.
Wall,
That's ages
3
ago.
years
Yeah.
ago. And people were coming out in Fianna Fáil, you'll recall, saying, let's call this what it is, racism. You cannot call people names, disenfranchise them, ignore their concerns, and then be shocked when there's consequences, when exactly what they said was going to happen is happening. Does that mean that everybody who's there is a local concerned local resident who's burning things? Of course not. But, you know, we're living in a society that is becoming more and more polarized, and people are becoming more and more disenfranchised with the government. And the reason why that heat and that anger and that rage in the public is there is because of government policy. There'll be no heat in it if they actually engaged properly. We have Aon or Reardon on the news saying, they don't have a veto. So,
look, there's a couple of things here in what you said. I mean, first of all, there's this always this emphasis, and I understand it. I understand because I read the statement put out by the local community group in Saggart that has been campaigning on this, and you know, obviously they were a little bit frustrated at what they called outside agitators coming in, and there is a sense, obviously, that there were people who travelled to CityWest just to cause trouble. You'll always get that, unfortunately, but there's also kind of like this kind of thing that we do in this country where you kind of close off, you kind of put a fence around the local area and kind of go, only people from the local area are allowed to be upset. No, the whole country is annoyed by this. And an awful lot of people who are deeply upset, and you know, because this kind of thing, this is not confined to CityWest. No, you have. I want to just talk a little bit about immigration policy, Sarah, because I think it's important to contextualize this. In Sudan, which is one of the most war-torn countries in Africa, the age of consent for sexual activity is 12. In Algeria, in many parts of that country, the punishment for rape is tribal. And generally speaking, if you rape a woman who is single and unmarried, or a child who's single and unmarried, one of the ways you can make that right is by marrying her. In Nigeria, 31% of women, 31% of them, say that they had their first sexual experience, usually as a teenager, and almost always as a result of coercion or rape. So that's 31% of women across the whole country. You were talking about people, and I'm not having a go at Africans. This isn't a racial thing, but it is a cultural thing. You're talking about people who are coming here from societies which have an entirely different cultural set of values around sexual violence, to the cultural values that predominate not only in Ireland but in the broader West. And you are expecting us to believe that if you bring in 20,000 of these people, that some percentage of them will not continue to practice the sexual values of their culture rather than ours. And a lot of these people come from societies where it is believed that rape is the woman's fault because she's turned the man on. She's inspired lust in him. You're talking about people who come from these societies, who've been raised in them, who've grown up. These are men who come here at 17, 18, 19. They've grown up with this culture. We are bringing them here. And then, people say, oh, this is racist. John McGurk, you're being racist. I'm not being racist. I'm talking about culture. I'm talking about the formative culture in which you grow up, which you bring with you. It's like when Irish people go to the US and maybe just some of us drink to an extent that shocks the Americans. I remember being in the United States and meeting this American guy who said, he was shocked one night by a guy who was an Irish guy he met. And the guy said the guy drank 9 beers and he was absolutely fine. And then he showed me the beers the guy was drinking and they were like that size. They were tiny. Your culture follows you. Irish people go to the US and they wear or the UK and they wear their Offaly shirts or their Mayo shirts or whatever. Culture is the thing that you take with you from one place to the other. And in the case of many of the countries where people are coming from as refugees, the sexual culture is rotten and anathema to what happens here. And that's a conversation that people are unwilling to have.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And that I said this to you on the phone earlier on, and it's another point is that if you even take the race stuff out of it, right? Many times I have seen over the years, I'm in my 42 years living as an Irish woman in Ireland, chaos and riots and or a mob when a local community finds out that there might be a paedophile who is recently moved in. So maybe all of this rioting and whatever isn't all just about racism. Maybe Irish culture just doesn't like pedos.
I don't think it's right. I have a confession to make. I sent Fatima down there on the Tuesday night, wherever night it was. It was Tuesday night when the rioting. Some people, if you're on this channel and you go back, you'll see her footage. If you're watching us on YouTube, just go a couple of videos over, you'll see her footage. I think like 100,000 people have watched it or whatever. And I also sent our camera guy, who is an Indian migrant. That's what he is. He's a lovely guy. Lives here with his wife and kids. Phenomenal guy. I won't say his name on the air,
but we love him.
And I was, yeah, he's great.
We love him.
And he'd actually be editing this podcast, so you hear yourself. I was genuinely worried. I was genuinely worried that people would, because of his skin tone, people would, mistake him for somebody who's living inside the centre and he'd get abused or something. To my knowledge, there was none of that. There was none of that at all. So I tend to think that a lot of this is anger at the crime. It's anger at the crime and it's anger at the state because the child shouldn't have been there. The chap who's accused shouldn't even be in the country. And this is entirely a matter of state failure. This isn't, two Irish people. This is the other thing. Emer Macaulay of the Journal. Sure, she's a nice woman. She went on Virgin Media the other night. And Matt Carthy was there, and I think it was Martin Hayden from Fine Gael, who was on the other side of the table, and they were debating about this very issue, and they were talking about kind of like trying to speed up deportations. And Emer Macaulay, representative of young left-wing feminist women everywhere, immediately turned around with you're all talking about deportations, but I'd like to see some of this anger when Irish men commit sexual crimes. Like
it's such a stupid old argument that they think it's this kind of silver bullet. Like, what can we do about them? Nothing. They go to jail. They live there. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't even make any sense.
And by the way, just for the record,
these are the people who will say people like her, the kind of people who will say we should have consent classes for men, for universities. We should have this. We should be teaching Irish men to be more, have the consent conversation. The ads are everywhere. Talk to your uncle, talk to your brother, blah, 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 blah. They're the people who'll be saying that, but they will be silent on the cultural difference between people that you just mentioned, coming from other countries where rape is much more common or whatever. They'll be silent about that.
Yeah, no, I don't know if there are consent classes going on in TUSLA, but I doubt it. But they're for young white lads in universities.
Yeah.
I'll say this as well, just on that point, which is the one that our friends on the left are making, which is kind of like you care when Irish people commit rapes. First of all, we oppose, at least on our side of the media fence over Gript, we oppose all sex crimes. But secondly, I think there's also an issue. I mean, I've written several pieces in Ireland about crimes that take place because it's the state's fault, where somebody should have been in prison. And I've written about at least one guy who's committed 3 serious sexual assaults, having received early release or remission on previous sentences. And as soon as this guy gets back out, he commits another crime, normally against women. And that is every bit as scandalous, because that person should not be at liberty in the state to commit the crime he's committed. If somebody commits their first offence, the state can't be blamed, because the state doesn't know. The state has no reason to know that, Johnny Maguire from down the road is...
Don't say an area in case there's some Johnny Maguire from somewhere.
I'm very
Yeah.
careful about that,
Yeah.
from down the road is this hypothetical Johnny Maguire refers to no real person, disclaimer, blah, blah, blah. The state's not to know that person is going to commit a rape. But if you've got somebody who's in prison for having committed one and you let them out early, then yes, it can be blamed. And if you've got somebody who's got a deportation order against them a year ago, who's not supposed to be in the country, and then they are involved in an incident in which they are accused of committing a crime, that's the state's responsibility as well. So I mean, God bless poor Emer. And there's a tone these young left-wing women use, like the rest of us are all idiots. Like, we've never thought of this before. Like, she's to patiently explain to us that sometimes Irish men commit rapes too. You'd spare me.
Hun, we know. It's like, but I think a lot of this, and I watch some of these late night shows like yourself, and you'd be frustrated watching it. They're the same old kind of lines but they're awful. They're not actually arguments. They're avoidance tactics to avoid having a conversation about the issue at hand. And the issue at hand is what is the consequence of a culture that comes into Ireland that is completely at odds? Should or are women being used as a litmus test for whether or not that are women and girls supposed to just shoulder that themselves and see what the consequences are? Is there a problem with immigration in Ireland? Obviously, a lot of people think there is. When people are deported or they don't qualify for asylum under the law, why is it taking so long for them to leave, etc., 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 etc.? And they don't want to have those conversations, because the result of those conversations, and even having those conversations in front of the viewing public, they know will probably start to turn hearts and minds in a way that they don't want. So they throw out this old trope because it's better.
Yeah. The other thing here is that, this is where I get a bit black-pilled, as they say, about all of this, is that this will fade away. I mean, this is like the Parnell Street incident in a way, in that obviously the Parnell Street incident was over 2 years ago. The individual who's accused of that crime still has not gone on trial. That has been allowed to drag on and on and on and on. I know there are fitness for trial reports and everything being prepared there, but I mean, if you consider that in the UK, the Axel Rudukama case, which took place 6 months later, was done 9 months ago when he was sent to prison, and in Ireland we're still trying to do a trial nearly 2 years later. This particular individual, whether he is acquitted or found guilty, I mean, we will never find out his name, because there is a child involved in this instance, so he will not be named under any circumstances. And details of the case, I suspect, will be kept very closely guarded in court. And of course, if in the event that there was a guilty plea, details of the case may never come out at all. So this is just going to be another one of those instances where something happens and there's a flashpoint of violence, and the Taoiseach came out and Taoiseach came out the other day and they said, oh, we'll look very closely at this. And Ben asked them, is this going to be another lessons will be learned moment? Simon Harris said, no, of course not. But it is.
Of course it is.
There'll be another lessons to be learned. We'll move on. And by the way, our presidential candidate is going to absolutely bomb in the presidential election tomorrow. But nothing to see here. The public aren't angry with us. We'll move on. Yeah.
Well, all I can say is just to mark it that, like I said, I have a 9-year-old myself. I've spoken to lots of friends of mine who have children roughly around that age. I mean, your friends tend to have children around the same age as you. And I speak for myself and lots of my friends when I say that women in particular are getting really, really pissed off with a number of things in the Irish state, and a lot of them come under the umbrella of the fact that Ireland is becoming a less and less and less safe place for a woman to be. And it's a lot of the blame for that lies with the government.
I just can't. I keep coming back. I try, I am probably, of the two of us on this podcast, I'm the one who's less naturally empathetic. I think no, I am. I'm not saying I'm not empathetic at all. I'm just I'm less naturally empathetic. I think it's oftentimes as well, it can be a male thing. But I keep coming back to, nothing has made me as angry this year as that statement from TUSLA. Like, this is a 10-year-old child. I've met your son, who's 9. I know he's a great kid, but he's a 9-year-old. A 10-year-old child.
Yeah, he's not even like he's when you met him last weekend, like he's a kid, like he doesn't know anything about football. All he cares about is football and his dog.
Yeah, he spent a good bit of time explaining his timetables to my wife. Yeah, and was really good at them, and is a really smart kid. But he's a kid.
But the gift he has, and this is nothing. I'm not saying this is true of lots of children. Luckily, the gift he has is that is his innocence. He doesn't know anything about anything. You know what I mean?
Look,
and there's children out there and who are under the care of the state, like TUSLA, and obviously they're in that situation because they've come from difficult circumstances and their childhood is obviously less than ideal if they're in state care as it is. But the state does have a responsibility to these children, and the state has failed in that responsibility. And there should be consequences, and not lessons learned consequences, John. Head roll consequences.
But this is my point, Sarah. This is my point. Because I want to say this as clearly as I can. I spoke to at least 2 people this week. Good people. People who are compassionate and decent and were horrified by this crime. Who got their news and read about it. And both said to me in the first sort of 10, 15 minutes of the conversation, sounds like the child had a lot of trouble though. Child was a bit difficult. Like, and that was the intent of that TUSLA statement.
Yeah.
The intent of that TUSLA statement was to send to the country the message that this little 10-year-old child was the problem. Now, we weren't the problem.
Dark.
And that is disgusting.
Yeah.
Heads should roll for that alone. And the fact that no politician has gotten angry enough about to call for a head to roll is shocking to me. Like, that is a 10-year-old. Like, if you know a 10-year-old in your life, and imagine a 10-year-old who does have difficulty. Maybe they've got severe autism. Maybe they've got developmental disorder. And then imagine turning around and kind of going to the whole country after that child has been allegedly grievously sexually assaulted and kind of going, oh, well, sure, they kind of had it coming. That's what TUSLA did. And I don't know why more people aren't pissed off about it. Anyway. Look.
Because the government, I'll tell you why more people aren't pissed off about it, because it's not being highlighted enough. It gets swept under the carpet because the entire focus then becomes on the rioting. And isn't it terrible? And RT's first story today on the news is interviewing representatives of the Ukrainian community to talk about how Ukrainian children are scared by the riots. That's nothing, I'm not disparaging any Ukrainian children who might have been scared by the riots, but like, come on.
Look, earlier in the
talk about the real
podcast. Earlier in the podcast, I said I understood the instinct to throw a rock. I understand the instinct, but there ain't a million years in which I'm going to go throw a rock at people. And you know why? Because it is stupid for the reason Sarah just said out. Nobody was happier to see that riot than the government. They had the cops ready. They had them all ready to go out, deflect the story. You can come out to Simon Harris can come out the next day, put on the frown. The frown. He loves the frown. And talk about how desperately serious this is. And, and Heather Humphreys can go on and start her presidential debate with all those people should all go home. Tell you one thing. We've our friend in our WhatsApp group who we sometimes mention on the podcast who's sort of aligned in Heather Humphreys' direction, shall we say. Made a sharp insight this week when he said, she'd have done herself more good if she'd come out and said, it's a disgrace. I hope they go mad. like she would have done herself more good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah, well, it would have been. That's the other thing. I mean, we'll get to the presidential election in a minute, but what I'd love to see as well is just from from politicians, the politicians in general, it's just a bit more of a sense of your own humanness. You know, like if that was in my community, I'd go mad. You know, I understand why people will be angry. I'm angry. There's none of that. There's just, oh, you know, I just like the people are right to have concerns. People were right to have concerns 2 years ago. Now the concerns have actually happened. People are right to be absolutely thumping.
No, but the other thing here is like, because you said something there that you said they'd like to see a bit of humanity from the politicians. This is the Norm Macdonald. Do you know Norm Macdonald, the great American comedian?
Don't
Sarah,
think so.
we have to improve your cultural education. So I have to improve mine, you have to improve yours. But like, trust me when I say a lot of people in the comments will know who Norm Macdonald is. He told this, he made this joke. His style is always very dry. And he once said that he was terrified that Al Qaeda would set off a nuclear bomb in New York and kill 20 million people because he was terrified of the backlash against peaceful Muslims. And I kind of feel like that's what happens in Ireland. No matter how serious the crime is, the political instinct is, I'm terrified of the backlash against immigrants. Like, the child is actually bypassed. The horrible event that's actually taken place is bypassed. And you can see the political brain going immediately to not all immigrants. Not all
But
immigrants.
also, I know people who are immigrants who are as angry or angrier about this than I am. What about them? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like it's just all really base. Every time something big happens, there's deliberate or not, it's just this categorization. Are you the goodies or are you the baddies? And the baddies are all over here, and the goodies are the political establishment, the media, and then whatever lovey they find to come onto the news and reframe the story in a different way. And it's bullshit. And the people are starting to see through it. I got a message from somebody on Twitter the other day. If he's listening, he knows who he is. And I was saying to him, I think people are starting to see through it a little bit. And he agreed. Like, you know, if that story about a 10-year-old girl had happened in Ireland 15 years ago, it would have been wall to wall news, and people would have wanted and probably gotten some kind of a scalp for it. Now the entire instinct is to protect, hunker down, reframe the story, say lessons will be learned, say people are right to be annoyed. And then hopefully in a couple of days there'll be an election. We just get to Friday, Saturday, and then there'll be an election and everyone will forget all about it. And then we'll just wait a couple of weeks and we'll weather the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's the plan. That's the way they roll it out. Do I think people are starting to see through it a bit? The problem I have with it is that as that goes on, lives get lost, lives get ruined, and the situation becomes increasingly worse.
Everything just gets progressively. Yeah. Everything else just progressively more shit. But I want to come back to this point, because the other thing, I made this point in an article during the week, and I was kind of buried in the middle of the article. But all of this stuff about how you can't talk about migrant crime because it stigmatizes migrants. That's the basic gist. That's the sentence. You know, if you talk about migrant crime, you're whipping up the racists. You're whipping up people who are like anti-migrant, and you're not presenting a fair picture of migrants. And most migrants aren't racist, all of which is true, right? Yeah. If you're watching this and you listen to me and you're going in that direction, I'll tell you, most migrants don't commit crime because most people don't commit crime. But it doesn't mean we can't talk about the crimes that do happen here. But the people who advance that concern all the time, Sarah, you know, you're whipping up hatred against migrants. Did those people give a flying you-know-what? I'm being very good, trying not to curse in these episodes for a little while at least. They give a flying you-know-what about what happened to Catholic priests and nuns when when a very small number of their cadre were found committing crimes against children. Were they out there? Were their politicians kind of going, no, we have to be very careful not to condemn or stigmatize all Roman Catholic priests and all nuns, not all nuns. I know this is a very small minority, it's an isolated incident. No, they were not. No, they weren't. How am I not cursing? Give me a medal, somebody. But like the hypocrisy.
I know a priest who told me that he was afraid, you know, at times to be out in public in his I always forget what it's called.
Cassock,
yeah. Because at a certain time priests were just so hated, and you know that's another thing in Irish culture that's acceptable. You will not be able to say anything about Muslims being able to pray, being given Croke Park to pray in, But Catholics, priests, nuns, Irish people's faith, traditional Irish values, Catholicism, going to church, mass, baptizing your children, fair game. All of it's fair game. Scorn, mockery, snide, and every Irish journalist who feels so inclined can go on to any radio show that they like happily and slate and sneer and slag off Catholic Irish people, but will celebrate Muslims praying in Croke Park, whatever. Now, but that's been going on for years.
Yeah. And will continue. I mean, this stuff will have to be voted out. It's not going to be phased out. Look, we're here to commentate on what's happening in society. There's an election tomorrow.
I know.
We are recording this as ever, folks, on Thursday evening. And when you're listening to it, the election is already underway and the count is on Saturday. And if you're listening to this on Sunday, I mean, Catherine Connolly's probably won by a significant margin if the last Ireland Thinks poll is correct, which put her on, I think, about 58 or 59% once undecided and spoiled votes and all that sort of stuff for taking that.
So just, because I, as you say, like I am more empathetic than you, I'll let you, before polls open, I'll let you revise your prediction that Jim Gavin was going to win, just out of kindness, if you'd like to make a new prediction there, John. I, however, also will change my prediction because I think I said that I thought Heather Humphreys was going to win, but that I wasn't going to underestimate Fine Gael's ability to shit the bed in every election where they have a huge, considerable lead. So that's kind of turned out to be true. What a boring, utterly uninspiring, pathetic charade this has been. I mean, I don't think any election in ever in my life that I remember in Ireland could even come close to the clusterfuck that this is.
Well, they'll say about you and me that we're just bitter Maria Steen fans who are kind of sad that Catholic Barbie didn't make the ballot. That's what they'll say about us.
Sure,
that's what they'll say.
I don't think it's anything to do with that. I mean, I think so. For the avoidance of that, then we will split the election into two things. One is the nomination process, and up until nominations closed, and then after that. So the nomination process, I have many grievances about, but they've been well aired, and we've talked about that on this podcast, and that includes Maria Steen. The election itself started with 3, now has 2. The debates have been, I mean, utterly mortifying. I stopped. First of all, there was too many, I think, because they became so boring. Neither of them have anything interesting to say. None of the issues that we would talk about on this podcast or that matter to a huge amount of the electorate were ever even touched on. The highlights or the main topics seem to be Catherine Connolly being a barrister, Heather Humphreys being okay with foxes being ripped limb from limb, and the fact that she has a wee dog or cat or something. I mean, and also Catherine Connolly is actually quite good at basketball or volleying a ball, and she has a million siblings. Would that be is that the highlights?
That fox hunt story. Those are the highlights. That fox hunting story. Like that just sums up Heather Humphreys' candidacy to me. Like, there's being a bad communicator. I mean, I've said on this podcast several times that I know of Heather Humphreys. I know a lot of people who know her. I have no reason to believe she's anything but a good, decent, upstanding person. There are lots of good, decent, upstanding people in the country. That's not a qualification by itself for being president. She has been appalling. Her communication has been... sometimes it comes across that the woman has never been in front of a camera before. This fox hunting thing, like the charge that's been made is you are in favor of seeing cute little foxes ripped from limb from limb by dogs. And she hasn't been able to answer it. Her only answer, as you say, has been, well, I have a wee dog myself, which I'm sure she does and I'm sure she loves. But she's neither been able to mount a defense of fox hunting on the merits. She's not been able to mount it. If she wanted to go balls out on it, she could have said, in large parts of rural Ireland, foxes are very plentiful and they actually pose a menace and they take chickens and they're a problem for farmers and they have to be controlled. Or if she wanted to go in a slightly more humanitarian way, she could have said, look, I support the pursuit of hunting with hounds has been going on for generations. I think there are really viable alternatives like drag hunting, which is where somebody drags a scented bag through the woods or whatever for the dogs. Or she could have just said, screw it, this is hurting me in the election, this issue. I want to be president. And I think fox hunting is wrong. I mean, she had no problem flipping, did she? No problem flipping her position on Gaza. She had no problem flipping around and kind of going rise of force surfaces in the occupied territories bill, which she no more effing does than the man on the moon. But on fox hunting, she couldn't muster herself to kind of go, I like the wee foxes and I don't think they should be killed. Like, how hard is that? Like,
Yeah.
this is how bad of a candidate you have. Like, someone that's killing her with young voters. Killing her with young voters. I mean,
The campaign itself is just diabolical. I mean, Fine Gael have never, in my observations, have never been great campaigners. I mean, it's a 2-horse race. Okay. And I even noticed some of the language I noticed today from Fine Gael people starting to say things like, well, it was us against all the other parties combined. You know, this kind of stuff. Would Mairead McGuinness have won?
Well, if you'd asked me that 6 weeks ago, I would have said Mairead McGuinness would absolutely walk this election. But then you forget that she'd have been dragging Simon Harris's carcass around her, just like Heather Humphreys has been doing. So who knows?
I know, but it's the
better communicator.
Better communicator. I think also just a super, super boring election. And the reason why the election is boring is because there's not enough people in it. You know, I mean, there's not enough choice. There's not enough grit there. There's obviously a kind of a, they know that for both of them, they know that there's an element of society that they don't want, that they will disillusion or disenfranchise if they talk about things like immigration, things like that. So they just avoid the topics completely. And overall, it's just been, I mean, I literally remembered today that it was tomorrow. They're all crawling to the finish line. Everyone is bored.
I think a lot of people will forget. I like you, I kind of, and I do this for a living, and I almost forgot it was tomorrow at one point today. You look at this, and I wonder how low the turnout will go. I mean, it was 43% in 2018. Was
and that
quite
was the
a low
lowest.
turnout.
Was 41 the lowest ever?
Oh, this is nerd stuff now that you're probably better on than me. I don't know what the lowest ever was.
I'm pretty sure the lowest ever in a presidential election was 41. And I think this will be in the 30s, probably low 30s. I saw people on Twitter earlier on talking about high 30s. I don't see that at all. I don't feel that at all. I could be wrong, but I get massive apathy from people. I get a lot of people saying spoil votes. Another point I was going to make is one of the really, and obviously I know that people are going to say, well, I am a barrister, fine. But a lot of people in legal circles are really angry, who I would have nailed to the wall thought that they were going to be voting for Heather Humphreys, are telling me that they're spoiling or not voting or whatever because they're so angry with the Fine Gael tactic to come after Catherine Connolly in her capacity as a barrister. I think that was a mistake, a tactical mistake. I'm not asking to have a conversation again about the cab rank rule or whether or not she should or shouldn't be taking cases or whatever. I think it's a tactical error for Fine Gael, the party of law and order, who, let's be honest, a lot of legal people are Fine Gael voters, or dyed in the wool Fine Gael voters. I think to do an attack on somebody, on the only other candidate, based on her work as a barrister, is a massive, massive political tactical mistake. And whoever's idea that was really needs to have a long look at themselves.
But it shows to me, I'm not going to get into the merits of the I have a minor disagreement with you on it, but not a big one. Because I just don't think they should have been talking about that at all. I mean, look, I've said from day one, this campaign has done nothing for me more than it has exposed the sheer intellectual emptiness of Fine Gael. This is a party that has resorted to this cab rank rule because it cannot make an argument on the merits against Catherine Connolly. And the best example of that is on foreign policy, where it sent poor old Heather Humphreys onto the television to lie and say she supports putting services in the occupied territories bill, because they knew she couldn't stand up there and make a convincing case for why that would damage the Irish economy, damage our international relations, hurt jobs, and Catherine Connolly's extremism for our foreign policy would be bad for the country. They didn't have the intellectual confidence to put out videos attacking Catherine Connolly for, not the things she said, but the damage that her presidency could do. And ask questions like, will the Germans continue to back us in the European Union and big European Council votes if our president is calling them Nazis for defending themselves against the Russians? They couldn't go after her on on her entire lengthy political record of supporting extremists around the globe and crappy economic ideas at home. They are incapable of making an argument against her because they've sold out intellectually so much to the left themselves that nowadays on everything, when the left come knocking on Fine Gael's door and say, we're criticising you on this, will you budge over a bit? Fine Gael's only response is, well, how far left do you want us to go before your voters like us?
Yeah.
Like you're an intellectual husk of a party. That's what they are. And Heather Humphreys is an intellectual husk of a candidate. And the problem for Fine Gael is that she personifies that intellectual huskness. You only have to look at her and listen to her to know that she doesn't have any original ideas. She doesn't have any political convictions. And those she does have, she can't communicate. Fine Gael to a T, 20%. That's why you're in 20%. Go home.
But also, John, you know that like when somebody is running for Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil or whatever, it's not just them. There's a team behind them. There's people from presumably, or there are people from in the background in Fine Gael, people who are on salaries, advisors, people who work in Fine Gael headquarters, who are all in the backgroround of this campaign. None of them have any ideas either.
Yeah, I think it's Martin Hayden, isn't it? Who's running the campaign, or at least the director of elections.
Who?
It has been appalling. But look, hold on a second. Even the slogan, Heather, a president for all, has the same bland nonsense as Simon Harris and New Energy. Saying nothing and putting you in a good perm or blow dry in a blue jacket and saying nothing and smiling on a poster. Oh, I was driving into Dublin the other night because I didn't watch the presidential debate, Sarah, because I was actually in the debate in UCD and I was driving in. And I made a mental note and I almost forgot to tell you about these. Maybe you've seen them, maybe this one in Malahide. They don't have them down here in Tipperary. They have these little teeny posters on the poles.
I know.
The little boxes.
Experience.
And I don't know, the ones I saw said, vote Heather for community. What the fuck does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Vote Heather for community. Like, how will my community be improved by voting for Heather Humphreys? You know? Will she? It is
but it's
just
also like, no,
nonsense.
but it's also...
I broke my rule.
Like, I'm becoming... Has somebody invented a time machine and then they've just come here from like 1995? Like, it's just such old school kind of like, it'll be all right kind of for community energy. You know, what I saw one that was...
Because God knows, the first thing I think when I look at Heather Humphreys is, God, she's energetic.
Yeah. I saw one that said, and it just says, it's like a rectangle, and it says Heather on the top, and then it says experience. Catherine Connolly has experience. Like, what are you talking? Like, it's energy, experience, all these buzzwords. What are the other ones that politicians sometimes use? Drive, you know, these kind
experience that counts.
Experience that counts. Working for you. This kind of shite.
Oh.
It's nothing. And it's so... The reason why it's funny and kind of fascinating at the same time is because there's no relationship between what people are talking about or actually want to hear about or feel or whatever and that campaign. It's a campaign that is a campaign that feels like it was come up with by two people who were put in a well with a laptop that had no Wi-Fi, and they were just told, come up with a box campaign for a president when you know absolutely nothing about what's going on in the country. They're like, oh yeah, okay, experience for community, Heather, just nothing. And then they did one attack ad and they attacked the entire legal community, effectively pissed people off. And I think it's going to go down. And this isn't actually, I don't think this is even Heather's fault, to be fair. I think it's going to go down as one of the most disastrous campaigns ever.
I think it is too. But just on that the whole campaign messaging thing, like I remember years ago, people who know me a little will know this. Maybe some of the listeners don't. But years and years ago, I was a very enthusiastic volunteer for Lucinda Creighton when she was running for Fine Gael for the first, and indeed I think the second time, in 2007, I think it was. And in the course of doing that, I got to know a lot of the kind of like the Fine Gael organization in that part of Dublin, and like it's made up of just. Like, it's what you'd expect the Fine Gael organisation in South Dublin to be. There are a lot of very nice middle-aged ladies who bake pies and cakes and come to meetings and say very important things and are genuinely involved in the community. And it feels like a campaign that some of those people put together. And I say that not to insult them, but
Mm.
like it's kind of just like well-intentioned and says nothing and Heather for president of the local bake sale club. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you go over to the other campaign, and obviously I don't think it would take anybody particularly intuitive to guess that Catherine Connolly is not my politics. But there is a momentum behind that campaign. She's not really saying a lot, but she doesn't have to because she's not being challenged on anything. It's better organised. It's better run. It's better. There's more momentum to it, whether you like it or not. There just is.
They're just running the standard left-wing campaign for everything. They're running the repeal campaign, they're running the marriage campaign. It's your CC logo, your t-shirts, your students for Catherine Connolly, your feminists for Catherine Connolly, we're launching trade unionists for Connolly. So it's another day in the news, another event for her to go to and be applauded. And so all you see of her is going around being applauded by loads of happy, smiley people, and it's got good vibes. And like how batty can she really be? Paul Murphy likes her. Very batty is the answer, and that's the vibe. It would not have been hard to beat. I'm convinced it would not have been hard to beat. Did you see the video the other day of her kind of? How would I describe this? Do you know in that episode of Father Ted where all the women come?
Yeah.
Do you know the way
we're into our Father Ted references lately?
We are, but do you remember the one where Mrs. Doyle is kind of in the shop and she's buying the giant bag of tea, and there's another woman, and the woman kind of glides up to her. It's kind of like they've obviously put her on wheels or something.
Yeah.
But this was the footage of like Catherine Connolly and a bunch of other kind of, I'm sure, very nice old hippie socialist women in their 60s, kind of gliding down Shop Street like they were barely walking at all, and kind of dreamily linking arms to John Lennon's Imagine. I just thought to myself, Fine Gael are losing to that. That's what they're losing to. Like,
I blocked it out. It was so cringe.
Look, this is what we're going to get for the next 7 years. This is what we're going to get for the next 7 years.
We already had a lefty poet, overreaching the office, carrying on. So, I mean, I think it's more like for political people, it's more interesting to watch. And I didn't, it's been a long and kind of boring in one way and not boring in another way. But I mean, I honestly think that and I'm not trying to be funny, but it feels like there's more organisation still around Jim Gavin's campaign than there is around Heather Humphreys.
But there is. I mean, there's an organised Jim Gavin campaign. It's hilarious. There is. There's like the Fianna Fáilers are out there doing like. In fairness to Fianna Fáil, I don't know.
Stick it to the government. Vote for. Like I know two people, and I who are related to distant relatives of mine who hate Fianna Fáil, wouldn't vote for Fianna Fáil, have never voted for Fianna Fáil, like whatever, and they're both voting for Jim Gavin
to stick it to the government. Look, I saw.
So there's actually, the irony of it is that there's some kind of, potentially you could argue that there's some kind of thought or actually Machiavellian strategy going on in the background of Jim Gavin's campaign. And he left the campaign over 2 weeks ago. And Heather Humphreys is still, and I worked in a credit union and I did my best. Okay.
Look, at least the dog won't have to move to the Ors. That's all I'll say. Because I think that would be traumatic for the little dog, assuming he got brought. Look, the thing with the Jim Gavin stuff is, like, I saw Breed O'Brien writing about this the other day in the Irish Times. I like and respect Breed. We've always kind of gotten on anytime we've met. Which hasn't been that often actually, but yeah. But like, Breed, hon, what are you smoking? What are you smoking?
I mean, like, to vote for Jim Gavin, yeah,
as a protest. And what's more, she said that votes for Jim Gavin will be recognised as a protest. They won't be recognised as a protest. I guarantee you now, if Jim Gavin gets 12.5% and Fianna Fáilers are asked, why do you think 12.5% of people voted for Fianna Fáil? They will say, well, it reflects the strong core Fianna Fáil support in the country and the great personal affection and great personal esteem in which Jim Gavin was held.
Energy that we put into this campaign. Yeah.
That's what they will say. There ain't going to be no Fianna Fáiler going on the television kind of going, oh, well, look, we did get those votes now, but I think actually a lot of them were people who were protesting the result. No. That's all. If you think that's how they'll be interpreted, and this is where this is the thing. Cormac Lucy, this goes down to how I've decided to vote. Cormac Lucy wrote an article for Gript the other day basically saying that people on the right have a responsibility to suck it up, suck the eggs and vote for Heather Humphreys because she's not Catherine Conn.
No.
Well, I've thought about this and I've also agreed. No, the immense amount of respect I have for Cormac and as much as I respect his right to vote how he wishes, and as much as I think it's important actually for people who are subscribers to read that argument, I think it's important for people to read that argument because there's not only one way of looking at this. And if you are undecided to vote and you are a Gript subscriber, go and read his article. He makes some good points and consider them. But for me, it is, I could suck it up. I could like swallow my pride and I could vote for Heather Humphreys number 1 to keep Catherine Conley out. But my vote, you don't put your number 1 beside Heather Humphreys on the ballot. You don't put number 1 and then you don't put an arrow and go with great reluctance and no enthusiasm for the Fine Gael party. No, your number 1 vote, as far as I'm concerned, for Heather Humphreys will count as just as much enthusiasm as Simon Harris's will. They'll both be the exact same. And they'll both be taken equally as an endorsement of that party's current record, campaign, general approach to politics. And I can't do it. Sorry.
I can't do it either. I'm sorry.
I can't do it.
And I've had the conversation with people who say, oh, democracy and people died or whatever. Spoiling your vote is still participating in democracy. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. That there will be a number. There will be an actual percentage. Roughly the average amount of spoiled votes in every election is roughly around the 1%. If it's 5, 6, 7, 8, it's a message in itself. That's a message I want to be a part of. That I don't appreciate or agree with the manner in which this election. I reject both candidates outright. I reject the campaign. I reject the process of getting selected into the campaign. I reject the fact that Fianna Fáil selected somebody who withdrew from the election and it continued. I reject all of the policies of Catherine Conley. I reject the campaign of Heather Humphreys and the smear campaign against the legal profession. I reject it all. I'm not voting for somebody. I'm not voting for somebody because I'm being kind of guilted into some kind of national kind of, oh, people died for it or whatever. People died for us to have a vote in an election that's actually doesn't make a mockery of the whole system. So I'm spoiling mine. It's just a matter of whether I decide to do it in a red marker or a purple one.
It's funny. I'll do the same. I'm not doing it with any pride or enthusiasm. though. I'm not. I understand what you're saying. I'm doing it more out of frustration. But look, I just think the irony of all this is Bertie Ahern would have walked this election. Would have walked it. Would have walked it. Would have walked it. President Bertie, and we could, probably people will be annoyed by that too. Some people will be, but like I feel a lot safer with President Bertie about it. I think he'd shake Donald Trump's hand and do a few deals and play golf with them and what have you. More than Catherine Conley will. Anyway, we have run out of time. Do you have any final thoughts?
No. What just before we go, so let's have a little. I think Catherine Conley is going to be ahead by 15, maybe 20.
I think I'm actually not going to. I think Catherine Conley will win. I have no idea about percentages because I think a lot will depend on turnout. The reason Catherine Conley is going to win, very simply, is that if you take the whole electorate and you look at the 20% of it, which is most left wing, these are the people who vote for Labour, People for Profit, Greens, Social Democrats, and Sinn Féin, or the left wingers in Sinn Féin. They're the only people in the country with anybody to be excited about. They're the only reason for the people to go out and positively vote for something. They're the only people. And they will, I think, vote in large numbers. And I think, therefore, if you do a rough math and put the turnout, say, at 35%, and, that a lot of it is that 20% of the election, then she could get 55 or 60% on the first count. I think she will. I think she will win on the first count because I just do not think that, I heard Simon Harris saying today, he wants Middle Ireland to come out for Heather Humphreys. I don't think Middle Ireland is arsed. Not after the week we've had. Not after CityWest. Not after your record in government. I don't think anyone is arsed to come out and put a tick beside the government's candidate.
You don't get to call on Middle Ireland to do anything when you treat Middle Ireland with contempt until it suits you.
That's a good note on which to end the podcast. She's been Sarah. I've been John. This has been a kind of a depressing week. Thankfully, I think that's probably the second last time we'll talk about the presidency. We'll do a quick once over on next week's episode, and hopefully that'll be it. But for the meantime, thanks to all of you for listening and paying attention and being our audience every week. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you next week. I've been John. I did the I've been John, she's been Sarah thing, didn't I? I did it already.
Yeah,
okay. Well, bonus. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.